Right. So we're just kind of chit-chatting. I've been offline a few days, so we're just kind of chit-chatting here about some stuff. I left off with auditing Fort Knox, right? Because they've been auditing Social Security Administration and finding all of these bad things out, right? So before I sit down, what am I wearing today real quick? And then we'll go on to some other stuff that you're not going to like. So today I am wearing, this is 100% wool top. This is and I have the matching bottoms underneath here. Okay. This is a 400 gram heavyweight 100% wool top. Unfortunately, it's made by Minus 33, and unfortunately, it's not made in New Hampshire. I didn't find that out until after I got it. It's kind of ticked off. So I'm just gonna have to start pay more attention to certain things. You know, I never would have thought they would have had this made overseas, but apparently it's made somewhere in Asia. I don't remember. It's probably China. But anyway, this is what I was talking about with the microfiber wool, okay, versus the mesh wool, okay. So underneath here is the Made in Norway Brynje top, and then I've got this microfiber top on top of that top. So I can wear this outside if I'm doing some Nordic skiing, and I don't really have, to really worry about putting anything on because I'm, making some heat, right? Then I got this type on the bottom, 100% wool, right? And then I got these old Woolrich vintage trousers on. These are wool. And anyway, so that's what I'm wearing today. And yeah, so it's been pretty cold for a while. I noticed a lot of these young folks, they're like, it's never been cold like this for so long. Blah, blah, blah. I've never experienced this in my whole life. They're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, some of them, and I'm like, you know what, back when I was younger, it was cold for months in the winter before they started their weather manipulation, geoengineering and stuff. Before they started all that crap, it might snow at Halloween. That's right, might even snow at Halloween. It started, you got autumn. And autumn was getting bullied by winter a lot of times before Thanksgiving. That's right. No kidding. It'd get bitter. Sometimes we would put on long johns to go trick-or-treating. At Halloween, we'd be putting on winter clothes underneath our costume because we were freezing our butts off out there going trick-or-treating. And so a lot of these young people, they don't even know what real cold is. Standing out there safety patrol as a kid, with your little orange belt thingy on, helping other kids get across the street, stopping cars, 40 below. Yeah, that's right. We did it. Yeah, trudging 5 miles both ways uphill, right, and all that. That's kind of a joke, but it really was serious back then. You'd come in from being outside, you'd take off 2 balaclavas, you'd take off a snowmobile suit, you'd have long johns on, wool long johns, you'd have a snowmobile suit, you'd have a wool coat, all that stuff, you'd have it on. Snowmobile mitts, set of goggles, stocking cap. Man, we were dressed, dressed for cold. At mucklucks, yeah, those were the real winter days, and it would go on until March would come around, and it was a joke about spring was a joke. March would come around, you still got 2 feet of snow on the ground. Mud season, right? Mud season. So it kind of thaw out a bit, and roads that were not paved would turn to mud. You better have a 4x4, right? And also during the winter time, sometimes you weren't going nowhere. You better have some stores, several months of supplies stored up, because sometimes it would snow so bad. In the 70's, I could remember it snowed so bad we were all digging out for weeks. People were going to buy groceries. Some people that didn't store up for the whole winter. Some people were going to buy groceries with the snowmobile. Be out there trying to get that sled up and running. Everybody get their little list together in the neighborhood, and 2, 3 people might go to acquire some goods. Maybe there was somebody who had a store, a mom and pop store that was open, and because some places were just not even plowed. Some people didn't live on roads that were plowed by the city or whatnot, right? Yeah. And I remember if we didn't have a snowmobile, but people that had snowmobiles, oftentimes they would park them in the front yard as a symbol of wealth, Kind of a little joke there, right? So anyways, yeah. Winters were long, winters were difficult, winters were fun. We would get out there and we would make igloos and sled riding. We'd go to the big hills and go sled riding. Heck, you can't even go sled riding anymore because they forbid people to go sledding at some of these places. You got to find some hill that's not been taken over by a ski, place, and go do your sled riding. Then, my mother used to even go sled riding. She would not get on a sled though. She would take this gigantic piece of plastic, right? Because we would put plastic on the windows on the inside of the home, right? And then sometimes we would cordon off between rooms with clear plastic and have a slit in the center, so you'd be walking through it like a meat locker in the house, right? So yeah. But my mother would take a gigantic piece of plastic, and she would just get up the top of the hill, and she'd sit down on that plastic, and whoosh, she would just go sliding down the hill on that plastic, have a good time. Back in those days, we had flexible flyers. That was a sled, and then they had the saucers like you saw in Christmas Vacation. Griswold had the aluminum saucer, and he put that stuff on the bottom, and then you saw him flying down the hill. We would take real beeswax candles, and we would run them up and down the runners of our flexible flyers, and and we would get extra speed out of that. You'd just take the paint off. You'd go home, sand the paint off of the bottom of the runners on your flexible flyer, and then you would just grease it up with beeswax, and you were good for a while. You get some speed out of that sucker. One time I was at the top of this hill. I was going so fast I could barely even hang on that flexible flyer, and it was a tiered hill, but it was all shut off from cars because it was all snowed and iced over. So I can remember going down the first part of that hill, and I hit the street that was going up, because it would wind around and around and around, and zigzag going up the hill. So you had streets and you had tiers to the hill all the way down to the street level, which, you know, was several hundred feet down there. And I got going so fast. My sister's husband told me after I came trudging back up the hill half an hour later, he says, I didn't think you were going to stop. He says, I thought you were going to hit the street. I had greased it up real good with beeswax, man. I hit that first street and I was just flying. I must have been doing about 40, 50 miles an hour. And I skidded across that street, and when I went off the end of that side and I went down the other hill, part of the hill, and I just kept going. And I was hanging on for dear life to, you know, crap, you know. And I got down, and I thought I was going to hit the street where the cars were. And it finally came to a stop because the plows had pushed the snow up high enough to where there was a berm. And I finally got to the berm down there. And I thought, too much beeswax. Anyway, I trudged back up the top of the hill, and my sister's husband was there. He was laughing, and he says, man, you were going fast. And he says, I never seen anything like it. He says, jumping off of the street when you'd skid across the street, and you just kept hanging on, and you kept going. It was fun. I'll tell you about another winter real quick. And my brother and his friend, the night before, they had run a garden hose from a spigot out to the street that dropped off quite steep, and at the bottom it was a T. And there were cars still going back and forth at the bottom, but nothing was going up and down that hill. So my brother and his friends said they drug a garden hose out there, and then they covered the whole thing, the whole street, in water just before dark. And then they went and they rolled up the hose. They shut off the water. They rolled the hose up, got all the water out, put it away, and then early the next morning, my brother wakes me up. He says, come on, man. He says, we got something really cool. I and so-and-so did. And we went out there. He says, get your skis. So I got my skis. And he says, we made this a sheet of ice. He says, I and so-and-so, we're going to go down to the bottom of this hill, and we will watch for cars. Yeah. And then we give the signal, you come down. So being young and, you know, thinking, oh, this is going to be fun, right? Well, I waited for their signal, and I started. I was going so fast. I was cooking. By the time I got down to the end of that street, the hilled street, I was going really fast. Anyway, there weren't any cars, thank God there were no cars. But there was a lot of snow built up from the plow on that other side there. And I went into a slide. Trying to stop. So I just turned my skis and I went into a slide, and I couldn't stop. And my skis and my feet hit something. I'm assuming it's near the curb, and I basically went end over end, and I went head first into a snowdrift up to my waist. And my brother and his friend came over and pulled me out by my legs. They were like, man, that was the coolest thing ever. Do it again. And I was like, no. Alright guys, come back in another one. I'll talk to you then.